This video is not intended for children. We're going to be discussing some pretty sensitive topics, such as addiction and abuse. Do not harass anyone who is mentioned in this video. Flashing screens are used pretty frequently. The internet creates some of the most famous people in all of our society. It makes huge careers for some, but for others, it is their downfall. This is to say that the internet quite literally changes people. This includes everyone, from the briefest, most surface level users, to the most terminally online, basement dwelling degenerates. Everyone who uses the internet has their personality changed or amplified by the content they consume and by the people they interact with on the internet. This could be the varying or even radical political opinions that you gain from browsing Twitter, the type of humor you enjoy from memes and videos you see on Instagram, or the sorts of fan bases you join from browsing Reddit or YouTube. If your personality isn't entirely changed by the internet, it is amplified to some degree. This is fine for most and usually doesn't have a big effect on your life. These small changes typically don't have any effect on the ways you interact with people, go about your day-to-day, or the way you live your life. This, however, is not the case for a select few. Some internet users have their entire lives and personalities altered by their time on the internet. These people often join platforms or groups on the internet to get involved, just like any other typical internet user. However, instead of finding a place where they can share their interest, or maybe even gain new ones, they instead are cheered on and manipulated by others to completely change who they are as a person. As previously mentioned, these same users aren't persuaded to change every aspect of their being. They're at least cheered on to bring out the absolute worst parts of their personalities that may have never even taken the forefront to their person. This is exactly why I say the internet changes people, and oftentimes this is to the detriment of that person and every individual around them.
Barbara and Weston, everybody. Say hello to lovely folks out there. You're being streamed on live Twitch network. Say some kind supporting words to everybody. Tell them how you're doing. How are you, Barbara Ann?
I'm doing fine.
Sadly, most of these individuals who are targets of this change are neurodivergent, and this is not simply a coincidence. These users are targeted for this exact reason. In fact, they are uniquely vulnerable to this phenomenon because they do not often understand that they are even being targeted in the first place. This video is not in any way being made to further put down these individuals, and I don't want anyone watching this video to even get a hint if that's what we're doing. I want to be as clear as possible. These neurodivergent individuals are targeted because of their conditions and differences. They're seen by trolls as easy targets and are taken advantage of and made to do things that they would likely not otherwise do. To further highlight this phenomenon, I want to compare two individuals who can fall under this exact umbrella. Christine Chandler is not a creator who was completely changed by the internet. Rather, her worst personality traits and bad behaviors were amplified by the things she saw and the people she interacted with on the internet. On the other hand, there's World of T-Shirts, or Joshua Block. He is the antithesis to Christine Chandler. Joshua would likely have not done the insane things that he's done if it not had been for the influence of people on the internet. Nevertheless, both of these creators went down a path of absurdity and insanity, not only acting bizarre, but also committing numerous crimes and reprehensible acts against themselves and the people around them.
Stay for boy gay. Hey, no racism on this stream. The stream is over, that's a dub. No, don't kill him.
You know who I am. But I have randomly decided to make this video because I am sick of all the false accusations and rumors and slanders that have been going around on the internet against me. So I tell you for sure and for true that I am straight.
Before we get too into the weeds of the similarities between the two, I want to first look into Christine Chandler closer and examine her career and how she fits into this whole thing. You've likely heard her name before, even if it was under her previous name, Christian. If you're unaware, former Christian transitioned from male to female and now goes by Christine. Christine has been on the internet longer than many of the viewers of this video have even been alive, and during this time she's made a name for herself as the most infamous lolcow. And I'm talking about ever, like no one even comes close to her level of documentation and infamy. Christine, who I'm going to refer to as Crisp when speaking of her before her transition, joined the internet around the turn of the millennium. During 2000, she attended Piedmont, Virginia Community College, where she would be kicked out due to her bizarre attempts at trying to get a girlfriend. She had made these really strange posters asking for a girlfriend in one of the most strangest ways imaginable. I'll show the exact poster on screen, and you can read it for yourself. Some of the things on here are actually really strange. Chris's most well-known accomplishment was the creation of Sonic Chew, Chris's original character that combined Sonic from the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise and Pikachu from the Pokemon franchise. Chris would use Sonichu as a way to live out her fantasies through her own original comics. One of Chris's most deranged early moments was when she made a comic of her having sex with one of her then friends. This was not a consensual thing. She and Chris did not talk about this beforehand. She did not want this comic made, just to be clear. She was deeply uncomfortable with this, and would soon end her and Chris's friendship shortly after. This is bad, like really bad. And shows Christine was always like this, even before the internet had done its work on her. But in 2021, Christine's most deranged moment would take place. Christine, encouraged by a young woman named Isabella Jinky, her own mother, she would brag about how she had recently had with someone online, and users would soon deduce what had actually happened. This would later be found out by the internet as a whole and by police as well. Chris would be arrested for this crime, however this case would later be dismissed, and I don't want to take anything right here lightly at all. We can joke about Chris's early behavior and her other bizarre things that she's done, but I do not want to make light of this. I only point it out to show how insane Christine has gotten at times. My point in saying all this is not to make the 1000th, 2000th, 3000th Christian documentary. If you want to learn more about this topic, there's so many videos out there. Like I said, she's probably the most documented person on the entire internet, but that's not what I want to do. Rather, I'm only using Christine as a way to highlight that the internet can change people. But with Christine, it's different. She was always like this. She was always doing these insane things, even before the internet had done anything with her. Before she had gained any following on the internet, she was making the comics, she was doing all of these insane things. And I think that's important to point out. Christine is not a victim of the internet. She only had her behaviors amplified. She was not changed, she was amplified. I want to make that clear to anyone watching. And as I just mentioned, Chris had been doing disgusting sexual things to other people in her life far before she had committed gross acts against her own mother. I pointed out the instance in which she wrote the sexual comic about her friend in order to point out that she had always had these tendencies, far before she had fallen under the influence of the internet. Because of this, I do seriously believe that Christine falls into the category of those who are not completely changed by the internet. Rather, she's within the category of those who had their behaviors amplified and made worse. Christine was always like this. She was always someone who had strange and uncomfortable desires, and these desires were realized and encouraged after her conversations with Isabella Janky. She may have never committed these acts if it not had been for the conversation she had with Janky, but I don't want to speculate too much here. She still could have. She could have had these desires even before she had met Isabella Janky. And aside from the aspects of her history, Chris has had many other outbursts. These outbursts were fueled by the way the internet treated Chris in her early years, and I think these outbursts are more defendable as they were in fact completely fueled by the internet, especially Chris's trolls, one of the most infamous being Liquid Chris. Liquid Chris was one of Chris's trolls whose whole bit was that he in fact was the real Chris, and Chris, you know, the actual Chris, was a fraud and an impersonator. This would enrage the real Chris, who, as you could have guessed, is on the autism spectrum, contributing to the fact that she couldn't understand that this was in fact all a joke. Along with Liquid Chris, every other person viewing Chris's videos were there to troll her and see her crash and burn. They were there to antagonize her. They were there to make her freak out and have meltdowns. They didn't care that she was someone on the autism spectrum, that she couldn't grasp the concept that these people weren't serious. All they cared for was the reaction. They used her for entertainment and treated her like the newest circus freak. I'm not here to defend Christine. Trust me, I'm not. I think the things she's done are morally reprehensible. However, it is undeniable that the internet only made Christine's behavior worse over time. They encouraged a young autistic creator to lash out, have meltdowns, and commit horrible crimes. Christine, for all her flaws and horrible acts, was changed by the tide of the internet. She was given the go-ahead by her trolls and detractors to live out her deepest fantasies and desires. She was constantly trolled, laughed at, encouraged, and documented, and it all made her behaviors far, far, far worse. If it had not been for the internet, we would likely have never seen any of her meltdowns, or they may have never happened to the level that they did. We would have never known about the comic she wrote about her own friend, and we would have likely never known about the assault against her own mother. I don't want to say the internet caused any of her behavior, but I genuinely don't know if she would have committed any of these acts if it had not been for the ways the internet treated her. I do know, however, that she would not be the same person if it had not been for the influence of the internet.
Punch you in the from the Bronx! I'm from the Bronx!
World of T-Shirts is a young man from Long Island, New York, who found success on TikTok from his adventures within New York. Similarly to Christine Chandler, Joshua Block is on the autism spectrum, which will soon be made clear. However, unlike Christine, Joshua was not a morally deplorable person before his time on the internet. In fact, Joshua started out as quite a wholesome high school kid. His name even comes from the fact that he had a website in which he sold t-shirts, of which were low quality and low effort, as Josh would simply upload images onto the shirts and claim he was the designer. Joshua also did not start out making long-form content like Christine. Rather, he began his journey making short-form content on TikTok. Joshua would eventually create a viral video in which he sang from Jay-Z's popular song, Empire State of Mind. This video went viral and made Josh a widely known figure on TikTok.
Yeah, in New York, concrete jungle where dreams are made of. There's nothing you can't do. Now you're in New York.
This was many people's first introduction to Joshua, but as Joshua grew his career, he discovered a very new way to easily gain views. This way of gaining views would eventually lead Joshua down a dark spiral, one in which he continuously falls into with no hope of ever getting out. Joshua began filming himself drinking massive amounts of alcohol and going out in public. This behavior was not only encouraged, but also rewarded, as he got in massive amounts of views and attention on the platform. While this behavior is not seemingly as bad as that of Christine's, it is still massively detrimental to Joshua's health and well-being. If Joshua were to keep up this behavior, he could expect to have any or all of the following health consequences: stroke, hypertension, cirrhosis of the liver, inflammation of the pancreas, and even cancer. This behavior will undoubtedly kill him if he keeps it up, and he will. It is what keeps his career alive. It's all he really has going for him anymore. This overdrinking is paired with other crazy and horrible behaviors from Joshua, such as the time he stomped on a fish in public. Although he claimed that it wasn't alive, this act is still so strange and cruel. Whether this was encouraged by the internet is unclear to me. However, what is clear is that Josh thought this behavior was acceptable, likely because he was constantly rewarded and praised for acting out in public. He has had many managers who saw his success on TikTok and partnered with him as a way to take advantage of his internet fame. They encourage Joshua to amp up his horrible and unhealthy behaviors because they know that is what gets the views, attention, and ultimately large amounts of money. I think these managers still qualify as part of the internet, as they found Joshua through TikTok and continue to exploit him on that exact same platform. These managers play into Joshua's worst personality traits, such as his very addictive personality, and use it to take advantage of him. No one in Joshua's audience is even entertained by this anymore. While at first they were watching to see the crazy things he was doing, now everyone is only checking on his TikTok to see how far he has spiraled. He even had a Reddit made about him, in which the users document his continuous spiral into alcoholism and other addictions. Looking back onto an old mini documentary made about Josh that explains despite his autism and other challenges he faced in life, he was able to become so popular. It's clear how much of a future Josh had in front of him. He was a nice kid who just wanted to entertain people. He was being praised by those around him as a creative person. It's so sad to see what internet fame did to Josh. His virality was what made him stand out and overcome his challenges. However, it would ultimately be his downfall. Everyone watching Josh, whether wanting him to stop his behavior or encouraging it, played into his hand and worked to only grow his platform. All of this came at a huge detriment to Josh's health, sanity, and ultimately his safety. I want to make clear that these two are similar, but that they are far from being the same person. The most important thing I want to make clear is that Christine is a far worse person, and Joshua is just a young man who's suffering from alcoholism. If you aren't aware, alcoholism is a disease, so we shouldn't even look down at Josh. Rather, we should view him as someone who needs help. And Christine, on the other hand, is someone who has committed some of the worst acts any human can commit. So I truly do not want to say that these two are the same person, or even similar in the ways they acted or the acts they've committed. The only thing that they have in common is that they were dramatically changed by the internet. They've had their worst behaviors amplified because they were rewarded for it. They were given attention that they likely wouldn't have gotten otherwise if they weren't acting in this way. As we stated earlier, neurodivergent individuals are often the targets of this phenomenon, particularly those on the autism spectrum. However, others can also be targets. The other main target is often children, but we don't want to discuss that because of YouTube's guidelines and because it is a phenomenon on its own. We aren't defending anyone with this video. Even if these individuals are neurodivergent, they have their own free will and can make their own decisions. I think Josh's alcoholism can be further blamed on the individuals around him, particularly his managers. These managers could easily get Josh the help he needs, but they choose not to, because doing so would mean that his main gimmick would be gone, and this would likely turn Josh's detractors away, causing the loss of both their income. Everyone who uses the internet is changed by it. It's an undeniable fact. Whether you accept this or not, you can at least realize you likely wouldn't have the same interests, hobbies, or beliefs if it weren't for the internet's influence over you and your personality. So when you look at the individuals who are far more vulnerable to this effect, it's important to remember this phenomenon can have larger impacts on these people compared to you or people without these vulnerabilities. This isn't me saying you're not allowed to laugh at something when someone does something absurd or stupid online. I even think this is warranted or even needed sometimes. Rather, don't be so quick to push people into behaviors that could ruin their life, as we've seen happen with Christine and Joshua. Lastly, remember that these people could have been you, if only you were a little different. If your life had just been slightly different, or if you had fallen into the same rabbit hole these people fell into, then you could have turned out just like Christine or Joshua. You could have turned out this exact same way. Thank you for watching.